matrix, expand our minds, and, make us all think, because that's what I love to do. As I'm always expanding my mind, I figure might as well share it with all of you as well. But hopefully you guys are doing great. It's been a time of recovery and recuperating and rest and being for me. And let me just say the universe always takes care of us, always brings exactly what you need, when you need it, and how you need it, no matter the circumstances. Now, some might think, well, what? When she's like, I am that I am, how's she like dealing with these stuff? Because you know what? We have these bodies that live in these elements, and sometimes they hit some tough roads. And sometimes we got to go through them. But the thing is, how do we stand through them mentally? How do we stand through them in our being and our soul? And what is the expression and feeling even of what those around us experiencing it with us are seeing it? So there's these moments in our life, right? And most people, most of the times, we don't even recognize while we're in them. And we only feel them. And they feel it as unrest. Sometimes you'll feel this heaviness or this confusion, kind of like a strange collapse of uncertainty. And they say, I'm tired. I'm unmotivated. Something is wrong with me. They say, I need to fix my life. But what if that is not even what's been happening? What if what you have been feeling is not a breakdown, but a threshold? What if the old self is dissolving? What if the mind is calling it depression when the soul is actually preparing to be remade? Let's take a breath. Just arrive. Put our hands on our heart and just say, body, mind, soul, being of this fallen mindset, this matrix, this world, deactivate, turn off. Spark of the divine, I am that I am. Creator mode on. Fully activated. Let's just slow down a bit. Because if you can learn to reorganize this passage, you will stop fighting what is sacred. You'll stop medicating every silence. You will stop labeling every darkness as failure. And you'll stop mistaking transformation for destruction. And that changes everything. Because this morning, we are going to speak about that space, that place, the in-between, we call it, the dark passage, the necessary stripping, shedding, the old self losing its grip, and the diamond beginning to speak. I call it the shit's starting to wash away and the diamond's shining through. And it's got nothing but to be heard now. And we're going to do this I'm going to show you through science, philosophy, psychology, nature, gnosis, truth. Because all of these actually point to the same reality, which has got to say something, does it not? It's funny, I'll get people come and they're like, there's some voodoo stuff you believe in. I said, really? If it's so voodoo, then explain to me why what I speak is in nature. What I speak is in our science. What I speak is even in math. What I speak is in ancient text history and even old theology. So, really? Or is it what you've been believing? Has been the lie and the voodoo this whole time? See, something has to die for something to truly live. You know that? Let's start with nature. I spent so much time in nature. It's the one place where I've probably gained most of this information from. Do you realize nature actually never apologizes for transformation? It doesn't go, hey man, you know what? Remember that time? Yeah, like, dude, I was going through some shit. No, it just transforms. And a snake does not ask permission to shed its skin. A seed does not become a tree without breaking open. And a caterpillar does not become a butterfly while remaining a caterpillar. A forest does not renew itself without fire, decomposition, and return. And nature understands a law that human beings often resist. What is finished must be released. What is no longer alive must fall away. What is hidden must be brought to the light. And the same law is moving in our lives. Sometimes you feel that law of restlessness, sometimes as a disorientation, sometimes as an exhaustion, sometimes as an irritation with everything around you, and sometimes as deep as sadness you cannot explain. And sometimes as the feelings that the life you used to live is no longer fits your body. It is not always a sign of sickness. Sometimes it is a sign that your old form cannot contain the new reality, trying to merge and let that land. Your old form cannot always contain the new reality, so the pressure rises. And pressure is not always a punishment. Pressure is often revelation. Pressure reveals where the structure is weak. Pressure reveals what is hollow. Pressure reveals what is not true. Pressure reveals what was only held together by habit. And that is why the breakdown feels so uncomfortable. It is the moment the shell starts to crack. And the shell was never the soul. Now let's move into psychology. Psychology, there are moments called identity transition and times when the old self no longer works, but the new self is not yet fully formed. These are the liminal spaces, threshold spaces. They can feel deeply destabilizing because the mind wants continuity. And the mind wants to know, who am I? What am I doing? Where is my life going? And what do I do next? And when those questions do not have immediate answers, the mind can panic. It can interpret silence as danger, and it can interpret uncertainty as failure, and it can interpret change as loss. But psychologically speaking, this is often not loss. It is a recognition the psyche is reorganizing around a deeper truth, and what you once identified with no longer holds the same charge. And what used to satisfy you no longer satisfies you. And what used to energize you no longer energizes you. What used to matter in the same way no longer matters. And that does not mean something is wrong. It may mean your conscious is expanding beyond the old container, and then think carefully about that. If your consciousness is expanding, the old life will feel too small. The old role will feel too high. The old expectations feel unbearable. The old identity will begin to suffocate you. And this is when people often say, I do not know who I am anymore. But that may be the beginning of truth. Because when the false identity falls away, there is first a vacuum, and humans fear the vacuum. But the vacuum is not emptiness in the negative sense, it is space. Space for something real to arrive. And then let us bring this into philosophy. Philosophy has always wrestled with the question of becoming. Are we fixed? Are we finished? Are we one identity forever? Or are we in emotion? The deeper answer is that the self is not static. You are not a finished sculpture. You are not closed system. You are not a single moment frozen in time. You are becoming, and becoming means that part of you will end. Ideas about yourself will die, attachments will die, certainties will die, old definitions will die, and this is not failure. This is the conditioning of growth. Even Hercules said that everything flows, that no one steps into the same river twice, and the river changes, you change. The world changes, the self changes. And if you resist change, you resist life itself. So when a season arrives where you feel as if your foundations are shaking, Do not immediately assume it is an enemy. It may be a summons to let the false break, a summons to let the temporary go, a summons to let the real emerge, a summons to take the shit off the diamond. And Nietzsche said one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to the dancing star. And that line matters because the chaos is not always there to punish you. Sometimes the chaos is the pressure needed for the new star to be born. And the old order must collapse. And the inner structure must shift. And the known must unravel. And then the new voice can arise. Let's look at science. Science tells us that change does not happen without transition. Systems reorganize under stress. Old patterns destabilize before new ones form. And the brain itself is not fixed in the way people once thought. Neuroplasticity shows us that the brain can change with repetition, attention, experience, and belief. And that means the self is not locked in a stone. And what you repeatedly think, feel, and embody begins to shape the pathways of your life. So when people enter a season of deep unrest, part of what may be happening is repatterning. Old neuron networks are losing dominance. Old habits are losing strength. Old loops are getting quieter, and new possibilities are trying to wire in. Did I change my hair? Yeah, I just re-dyed it. So, but that process can feel awful before it feels beautiful. Because the brain loves the familiar even when the familiar is painful. Even when the familiar is limiting, even when the familiar is built on fear. And the nervous system will often choose the known over the unknown. It will choose survival over expansion, and it will choose old pain over uncertain freedom. And that is why transformation can feel like grief, because something familiar is being lost. And the body does not always know that what is being lost is not your truth. It only knows it is losing a pattern it has lived with. So if your body feels uneasy, if your mind feels cloudy, if your emotions feels unstable, if your dreams are changing, if your appetite changes, if your sleep changes, if your energy changes, do not rush to declare that you are broken. Something may be reorganizing, something may be older than your personal story may be moving. And let's bring this to agnostic perspective. The agnostic writings, the material world is often portrayed as a place of forgetfulness, illusions, and distractions from inner truth. The kingdom is within. And not because the body is evil, but because human beings so easily mistaken the outer world for the whole of reality. And the Gnostics spoke of awakening gnosis, inner knowing, direct recognition, remembering what is real. And this is important because the dark passage is often the place where the false knowing dies. And when the false being self begins to crack, the inner spark starts to show itself, and this is not random suffering. This is the unveiling of essence. The old layer loses authority, the false story loses grips, and the external noise gets quieter. And what remains is a deeper voice, the voice that cannot be ignored, the voice that was always there, the voice of the diamond. The diamond is the true self, the soul, the spark, the radiant core that was buried under pressure. Wound, conditioning, expectations, and performance, and now that diamond is beginning to speak. Not loudly at first, but always comfortably, but unmistakably. And let's talk about this, how this feels hard, because the old self does not die without resistance. The old self is built from repetition, and it knows how to survive, and it knows how to please, and it knows how to hide, and it knows how to adapt, and it knows how to perform, and it knows how to be what others need. And when the old self begins to lose power, it often creates distress. And it may show up as exhaustion, it may show up as emotional flattering, and it may show up as numbness, and it may show up as agitation, and it may show up as confusion, it may show up as inability to tolerate what once felt normal. And that is why some people suddenly can no longer do the jobs they once did. Why some people cannot keep carrying everyone's expectations. Why some people begin to question the life they built, and why some people feel like the path they were on has split open underneath them. Because the soul is not always interesting in preserving the old arrangements. It doesn't need to. It doesn't want it. It wants the diamond, man. And sometimes it wants honesty more than approval. And sometimes it wants becoming more than survival, and that feels like death. But it is the death of what was never truly you. And that's the beautiful thing. All right, you guys. Thanks, American Sonar. Peace and love. We'll see you guys next time.